Well, hello, and welcome to our continuing devotional through the book of Colossians. We're starting Colossians chapter 3 today. We'll spend a couple weeks on these first couple of verses. Today we're only going to read verse 1 of chapter 3, where it says this. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Now, this is a major focus of the Apostle Paul in this chapter. And when he says seek that which is above, what he's saying is we now have to base our beliefs, our moral values, our behavioral choices on heavenly standards, on what is above, what comes from heaven instead of what comes from this world. In regard to our values, our thinking, and our activities, we need to embrace not what has become familiar to us or what is popular or accepted in the world, but what is promoted and valued and seen as good and right above in heaven. We need a heavenly orientation in our thinking, in our values, in our activities. Perhaps a helpful illustration is when a person joins the military, when they're enlisted in the army, for instance. Well, when they enlist in the army and they actually get, sworn in and they go to the base and they begin their training, they're starting a brand new life. They have to have new standards. They have to orient themselves to military thinking, to military values as opposed to civilian. The way they dress, the way they behave, the way they respond to somebody telling them to do something and giving them orders, their expectations of life, all of that changes because now they've went from being a civilian to being in the military. Well, we went from being earthly to being raised with Christ. And with that new position, with that new relationship, with that new standing with God of being raised with Christ, verse 1 says we should seek things that are above where Christ is. Perhaps a simpler way of putting it is found in Romans chapter 12, in the very familiar verse, Romans 12, verse 2, that says this: do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Don't be conformed to the world's values around you, but be transformed. Get a new mind. Let the word of God, the things that are above, change you so that now you embrace and you accept and you seek after the will of God that is good and acceptable and perfect. Now, this is challenging. When Paul says seek things that are above, it's challenging because our way of thinking, our moral value system, our spiritual beliefs, our activities, they're often shaped by the wrong things. Three things in particular tend to shape all of us and conform us. This broken world system, which, the culture, the media, our friends, the rebellious flesh, sometimes called the sinful nature. We already have a kind of an inbuilt inclination, instinctively to think in wrong ways, to act in wrong ways, and to desire that which is opposed to God. That's called the flesh. And then Satan. Satan is real and he's alive, and there are spiritual forces at work that are trying to direct us in the wrong direction. So with the world, with the flesh, and with Satan, they're all trying to press us and shape us into its mold. And we have to make a choice. And that choice is to seek things that are above. We are a new people. We're now seated with Christ. We've been raised with Christ. And we have to choose to follow Christ in everything and be shaped by his word instead of being shaped by this world. But that requires commitment on our part, an effort on our part. In the same way, if you've ever went to the beach here in Florida and you're out in the water, particularly on a day when there's larger waves, that current pulls you away from the shore and pulls you down away from where you put your towel and your gear. And you have to purposely remember to focus upon where you should be and purposely keep taking steps in that direction because you're being pulled by the current in the opposite direction. That's true spiritually as well. We must choose to set our mind on things above. We must choose to go in the opposite direction. We must choose not to be conformed by this world, by the spiritual forces, by the moral values, by the pull of the flesh, and instead choose to follow Christ and set our mind on the things of Christ. We must now base our beliefs and our behaviors and our choices on heavenly standards. I trust that you will do that. Have a blessed day.